Good evening, everyone. I am here today on my own. I'm flying solo without Dave, which is a good place to be always for me. I am talking with Tim Pilcher. Is that how I say your surname, Tim? I've never ever asked
Yeah.
you. It is Pilcher, isn't
Yeah,
it?
culture. Yeah, it's quite easy.
um, we've known each other for quite a while now, haven't we?
Good few years. It's
Good
got to
for
be a good 10 years, something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Can't
So,
remember the first time we met actually, but you've always been a great supporter of the podcast, and I thought it was time to return the favour and
oh,
support
thank
one
you.
of your endeavours. So before we kind of get into the reason why I've brought you up to GS, do you just want to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, okay. I'm a writer. Oh, now what I should say is I'm an Eisner nominated writer now.
It should.
Uh,
I've got it written down.
Editor and publisher. So worked. First job in comics was working at DC Comics on the Vertigo line as an assistant editor, and then have since then worked for various other publishers over the years, including running Humanoids UK operations for 4 years, and now currently co-owner of Soaring Penguin Press, which is a graphic novel publisher, with John Anderson, who's the co-owner of that, and have written numerous books on comics. I think probably about 20 or so on different areas of comics, including the Eisner nominated How Comics Work with someone your listeners might have heard of called Dave Gibbons. I think he's quite popular with some
Yeah,
people.
he's some circles.
Yeah. I don't know. He's a bit of a hack myself, I know he'll hear this now and he'll give me so much grief. But yeah, we did this thing called How Comics Work, which was great. It was, as I call it, kind of like the how to create comics the Dave Gibbons way. But it was a lot of fun, and we kind of dug into his massive archives. I mean, it's incredible how much stuff he's got, and we're both really big fans of process books, and so it was a chance to kind of go through his stuff. And dissect how comics work using all of his examples. And he's kept literally every sketch and doodle and thing he's done over the years. So it's just
Wow.
absolutely bonkers. So yeah, so that was a fun book to do. And actually, it took about 2 years from conception to print, but it whizzed by, and it was like one of the most fun books that I've ever done actually. So yeah. Comics, it's been in my blood for all my life, really. So I'll never get rid of it.
No, we tend to bump each other. Well, I think the last time we saw each other actually wasn't at a comic convention, was it? It was at the London Book Fair.
Oh yeah, it probably was. So last year,
It was, wasn't it? Yeah.
So yeah.
But we've bumped into each other, and
Well, I've literally just come back from this year's because that was finished yesterday.
oh,
So yes, and there was a good gathering of comic-y people around. Bumped into Kev Hopgood and Alex Fitch and Shah Nazir, who's the publisher of Black Hearted Press, BHB. There was a few comicsy people knocking around there. Tony Bennett from Knockabout Comics. So yeah, it was. It's always nice to see people at that show.
I do think now that sort of certainly the London Book Fair seems to be waking up a lot more to sort of comics in general.
No, I think that's the book trade in general. I mean, we've seen this really interesting final switch around where I think bookshops used to begrudgingly stock a few graphic novels shoved in a corner somewhere and kind of go, oh, all right, we'll pay some lip service to it. But now that you could generally see there is a nice big space in a lot of the bookshops, and genuine sales coming through those bookshops as well as the comic shops. So signifies there's been that kind of tipping point that's happened where general public, I think, now are aware of them and are now aware that comics as a medium can tell anything, any kind of story, whether that's fiction or non-fiction, whether it's genre superhero or kind of like how to do cooking, or anything like that. So I think that was the point where we're finally catching up with, say, sort of Japan or France, in the sense that the general public has really kind of woken up to the possibilities of comics. And that's exciting because we're now at that beyond that point of having to try and convince people that comics are great. And just to say, well, check them out. It's no longer a hard sell, I think, in the way that it perhaps used to be.
Well, the main reason I've got you on, is to talk about the Breakthrough project, which is being spearheaded as part of the Lakes International Comic Art Festival, which I believe takes place in October. Is it October this
That's
year?
correct.
Yep.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Well, this is kind of like a subject that's kind of really close to my heart. So I'm trying to think. I've been thinking about this recently as getting on a bit and everything. But I was really lucky to I was really lucky to have a lot of really good comics mentors when I was kind of sort of growing up in my career. So I had Art Young, who was my boss at DC Vertigo, who kind of taught me how to edit comics and to learn all that kind of stuff. And before him, I had Paul Hudson, who used to own Comic Showcase, which was the comic shop in Covent Garden, which is, but that was my very first job in comics, working in retail. And he kind of took me under his wing and showed me the ropes of what retail was all about. And that's where I learned my kind of comics history. And then after all of that, I worked for Des Skin for a while on Comics International and learnt a lot from him as well. So I've had, kind of really interesting, high-profile people that I've learnt a lot from. And so I always thought it would be kind of good to be able to kind of pay that back in some way. And a couple of years ago, I got asked by a local publisher, community publisher in Brighton, to co-mentor with a chap called Paul Collicott, who's a brilliant comics artist and illustrator, to put some teams together and create a graphic novel which was all about the history of Brighton. And we basically got, what was it? I think it was about 18 people from all over Brighton to work together. They had to work in teams, so there was no kind of writer-artist situation. They had to work, if they were a writer, they had to work with an artist and vice versa.
Yeah.
And, we trained these guys up over 18 months and got them to do this amazing graphic novel. And they all did kind of incredibly sterling work. And it created like a springboard for a lot of people's careers. So since then, there's at least, I think, 3 or 4 people who have gone on to do professional comics work since then.
Wow.
And so that was really kind of gratifying to see that, we could take these people and give them a whole new career. And so really, I got chatting with the ladies of the lakes, as I say, they're the organisers there. And we were saying, well, it would be really good. I mean, that was wonderful because, we could do that within Brighton. But, that obviously there's the whole country out there. And it was really a chance to kind of say, well, look, why can't we do this on a national scale and really give some sort of disempowered or disenfranchised people a chance to, express themselves creatively and also potentially start a career in the comics industry, give them that leg up by providing a kind of a mentoring scheme to train them up, give them the skills that they need, and set them on a path to working in comics. So that's kind of how it came about, really. So we've got 6 spaces for people, and we're looking for people from all across the country. So whether it's sort of Wales, Cornwall, Scotland, Norfolk, as diverse a places as possible, and really looking for those kind of those voices that don't really get so much sort of traction within comics. I mean, it's interesting, in recent years, the kind of LGBT and BAME kind of communities have been getting a lot more traction within comics than certainly has been in the past, which is good. And there's obviously always room for improvement. But there's also, it kind of made me start to think there's like, comics can be not only desperately very white, but also very middle class and very kind of like, sort of Southeast centric, and like people thinking, but also, a lot of comics evolving around metropolitan areas. So it would be really nice if we could get people from more of the rural communities, older people, OAPs, or sort of elders who are looking to tell their stories, who have never thought about doing it in a comic form. People from disadvantaged backgrounds, perhaps, having forced to be using food banks, or, they ideally people that have never had the chance or the opportunity to go to further education. And those kind of voices you don't hear so much of in comics. And it would be really nice to kind of, if we can find that sort of, group of that cohort of people. I mean, my ideal would be to have like 6 people who are the most disparate group you could ever come across and get them all together in a room, because I just think that would be really interesting, to see what people could be doing together. So, whether it's a kind of like an old Asian bloke meeting, some sort of, young girl from Cornwall who has, never had the opportunity to meet any comics professionals, or, that's what it would be really nice to see, and that kind of real mixture. So we're putting out a call for people to submit, and sort of sign up for it. So as I said, there's only 6 places, but all of the expenses will be covered, and we're going to be doing sort of 3 workshops over that 18-month period, over a kind of a weekend, which will give them the kind of full sort of training and skills that they need. And we're going to hopefully have at every weekend a professional comic creator coming along and giving the benefit of their advice and experience.
So I know you're going to be one of the mentors, aren't you?
Yeah. So I'm kind of running the project all the way through. So I'll be kind of providing. So when we're not doing the weekend sections, I'll be touching base with everyone on a regular basis and doing kind of one-to-one mentoring throughout the whole period, and just seeing how they're getting on and how they're developing. Getting them to send pictures of pages they've done and this kind of thing. But
Now, do you have any other mentors lined up that you can sort of tell us about?
I do, but I don't necessarily want to kind of give it away at the moment.
Give the game away. Okay.
But we'll be announcing those kind of nearer the time. But they're fingers crossed they are some of the biggest names within comics, and they have been associated with the Lakes in the past, and may have been associated with kind of laureate type stuff. So that's all I'm saying.
The way you've sold that to you, you've made it sound you could change that and call it the Avengers Initiative and change the name to Nick Fury, really.
Yes. We just call it, it's the Breakthrough Initiative. Yeah, exactly. I hadn't thought of it like that, but yeah.
But I think it's a fantastic idea, and I know from when I was much younger, get ready to leave school, my initial career path was I actually wanted to be a comic artist.
Okay.
Something I've never really talked about much. I've still got some drawings in the cellar somewhere, but going way back when, this is 80s or whatever, and I was in North London. To begin with, anything like that was just so frowned upon at my school. It was unreal. And then secondly, even when I kind of got past that, there was no route for me, if that makes sense. I had no idea where I could go. I couldn't really get into art college or anything like that. So I had no idea what I was going to do with it. So I just gave it up. I just gave up and just carried on with life. So I think obviously things are very different now, just because of things like the internet has made this sort of information available to everyone. You can get sort of guides on how to do comics now, how to produce comics and stuff like that. But the fact that you've got access to people who have effectively, walked the walk, as it were, I think is I think it's a fantastic idea, because it's not just about, I don't think as well, it's just about teaching people, how to write scripts, how to draw, how to do panels, how to do inking. Because to a certain extent, you can find that knowledge, but what you can't find is that knowledge that comes with experience.
Yeah, no, and I think that's kind of really important. and also it's just that that chance to meet someone kind of face to face, because then you can ask those questions, and actually kind of dig into something that perhaps you didn't know about, and you need to kind of have that immediate sort of reaction, because you can only learn, I think, so much by looking at things online and what have you. And a lot of this is, I mean, back in the day, as you said, there was virtually no one teaching this sort of stuff. And I was lucky. I did a little bit of sort of teaching and helping out at the London Cartoon what was it called? It was the London Cartoon Trust, I think it was. And they did kind of like courses for kids, and that was kind of David Lloyd was heavily involved with that from V for Vendetta. And so that was really good, and it was a charity thing that ran for a while. But now, of course, there are lots of courses at universities specialising in comics. Probably the most famous one being Dundee. So there are those universities out there, but the problem, of course, with all further education and universities it costs a lot of money to go to these things. I mean, it's a minimum of about £9,000 to kind of go, and not everyone has that sort of money or is prepared to get into that sort of debt. So for us to be able to offer something that will give them that same kind of step up, over a time period to hopefully launch a career, feels to me sort of like a really important thing to do, and particularly for people that don't have that opportunity for further education. It's it's a chance for them to really kind of engage and kind of hopefully do something that they perhaps because again, we're not necessarily looking for huge comic fans. I mean, great if they are comic fans, but that's not the prime requisite. And they don't even have to have done comics. So we're asking people just to send in, not originals, obviously, because we can't return anything, but, photographs or samples of writing. They may have written some poetry or short story. Art-wise, they may have done some paintings or made a vase or whatever it is, just to show kind of a little bit of their own creativity. And explore that. So it doesn't have to be comics work at all, but just something that shows what they like to do creatively, so we get a feel for them. And we will put that training in place. So honing that creativity and fine tuning it into something that will eventually be collected. So this is kind of where Soaring Penguin comes in, is that we will be then collecting all of that work at the end of the course and publishing that in an anthology. And its kind of focus is going to be what's life like in Britain today. And that's why we're kind of keen to get people from all over the place. Because I think this is one of the things that people often forget, is that everyone's experience of living in the UK is extremely different from everybody else's experience. And I think that's the key, is to kind of show that, well, a shopkeeper in Wolverhampton and a bus driver in Solihull, their experiences of life are going to be totally different from each other. And, that's what I'm kind of interested to explore. But it won't necessarily be, again, we don't want it all to necessarily be autobiographical comics. So it could be something like reportage, or it could be like a fantasy story that's based on experiences and extrapolating from that. So it's it's very open-ended, but kind of touching on that theme of life in the UK. And I think it's going to hopefully bring out some really interesting stuff. So that book will then act as a kind of portfolio for people. They can say they've been professionally published, and that will be as a stepping stone for their career.
And it mentions as well that, as well as the anthologies, there's also going to be an exhibition of the work as well.
Yes, so not this year, but the following year, so 2021, there'll be an exhibition that will coincide the book launch as well at the Lakes. So the participants will be invited to the Lakes to be there for the launch of that. And so they will get a free trip to the Lakes, as well as sort of 3 weekends away on workshops, meeting comics professionals and learning how to do the craft. Which
is, again, I think, going back to what you were saying about, other comic courses like sort of Dundee and stuff like that. I think one of the really interesting things about this is the fact that you're going to be doing something for 18 months, and you're going to have a solid piece of work at the end of it that will be published.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's the key, because it can be very disheartening if you're kind of working alone at home on your own, not having anyone to kind of show the work. And, this is where I always think editors are so vital, is just to be that first point of contact and have feedback. So, am I doing this right? Could I be doing this better? When you don't have anybody around you who knows about comics or perhaps even cares about comics, and you're working in this kind of isolation, it can be a little disheartening sometimes, because you just don't know if you're doing it right or not. So to be able to provide that sort of feedback for someone, and to say, well, have you thought about doing this, or try changing that? I think that's invaluable for any creator, whether they're starting out or professional. Frankly, I think you'll find that most creators will say the best kind of editor is that kind of, they act as a first reader. They're there as the sounding board, to help people, to help creators be better. I think that's one of the things that, as an editor, I've always tried doing is like, how can we improve this? Even if it's great, it's like, how can we make it greater? And that to me is the joy, because again, I think with comics, the thing that always appealed to me about them is they are largely a collaborative medium. Even if you are a writer artist and you're kind of creating your own work, I think having an editor is an invaluable tool to have, to be able to have that feedback. And so that's what's always drawn me towards working in comics. I think it's that collaborative element.
Obviously, I've been around the comic scene now for quite a while, and that's certainly, as someone who writes but doesn't write comics, although I have dabbled in that field as well. Writing prose can be a very solitary profession. That is that one thing with comics that I've always loved, is just seeing that camaraderie between the sort of creative team, certainly that I've worked with, some of sort of our titles and stuff. So is there anything else you can tell us about it, or where can people find out more information?
Yeah, well, the submissions is going to be ending in 2 weeks' time, so people haven't got long to get their submissions in. But if they do go to the website, which is comicartfestival.com, and go /project/breakthrough, then they will be able to find out all the information is up there, plus the submission forms, and sort of all the extra information, so they can download those forms from there and send in sort of their bits and pieces and send in their application form. But yes, so submissions deadline is the 29th of March, midnight on Friday the 29th of March. So we're hoping we've already had some good submissions in, but yeah, open to lots more.
Yeah, that was going to be actually my next question, was going to be, how many submissions have you had in so far? What's the quality been like? Not quality, It's probably the wrong way to put it, but have you seen actually you have had submissions from all walks of life, different levels of skill?
Absolutely. I mean, it's definitely already, we're seeing some really interesting stuff. Obviously, I can't say who, what, but no, it has. We've already sort of, had an interesting mix. And again, it's an interesting thing. It's not going to necessarily be completely, how would I describe it? It's a mixture of a meritocracy and also positive discrimination, because I think that mix is going to be kind of vital to the project. But it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because I mean, a lot of people, when you talk about doing comics and everything, people go, "Oh, I can't draw," and often I tell, whenever I've done workshops, okay, it's not about drawing, it's about storytelling, and and I often sort of explain that just a couple of stick figures, because how Harvey Pekar used to kind of storyboard out all of his comics. And the way he would do it is he would fold it in half horizontally, a page, then fold it twice vertically. So you'd create sort of 6 panels just folded out.
Yeah.
And then he would just draw little stick figures and then speech balloons over the people and give that to the artist. So he was doing comics, and back in the 80s, Annie Lawson was a great kind of cartoonist, and all of her figures were just little stick people. But the concepts and the stories and her storytelling was so strong that it didn't matter that they're stick figures. So, I do like sort of people to realize that you don't have to be Brian Bolland or Dave Gibbons, or you don't have to be an amazing artist that's kind of like is absolutely fantastic, as long as your storytelling is clear and you're conveying your message with passion.
Yeah, my last question. This is my last question
Okay.
to you, which I am going to ask because you're a comics person. What are you reading at the moment? What's doing it for you at the moment, comics-wise?
Oh, blimey. That's a very good question. I feel so busy kind of like doing stuff that I haven't read nearly as much as I should do. And,
Yeah.
It's really funny. It's like, I often say this about when I was working in the comic shop. You could generally keep track of pretty much everything that came out just because you were working in a comic shop. But also there were so fewer titles. And now, there is just so much material out there. And it's just impossible to keep up with it all. I had read the first couple of issues of Garth Ennis's Sarah, which I really enjoyed. That's very good.
Okay.
That's the World War II thing about a group of Russian female, it's about a Russian female sniper or team of snipers during World War II. And that's got some beautiful artwork by Steve Epting.
Right.
And that's published by TKO. So yeah, that was probably about the last thing I kind of read. I just got the. I've been doing these essays for Fantagraphics for their complete Crepax collection. So I just got number 4 of that and kind of slowly working my way through that because they're enormous tomes. So they're actually both physically in size, but also they're very thick. So there's a lot of story in there. So I'm kind of working my way through that at the moment, which is it's very enjoyable. So it's funny. He's one of those guys that. I think it's a very interesting thing. I often think that kind of like how your taste in comics is a bit like your taste in sort of alcohol or chocolate. As you get older, your palate evolves and changes. Now, I remember, being, a brash kid in the 90s and kind of loving all the superhero stuff and everything. And now I'm much more, and I would just be dismissive, if you could believe this, of like the EC comics and all the old stuff and going, that's all rubbish, so it's old. I want the new stuff, the exciting things. But now I really appreciate that work. And people like Crepax I never really appreciated at the time. And now I can really see, the skill that's involved. So it's like going from white wine to red wine, from lager to bitter, it's like milk chocolate to dark chocolate. Your palate evolves and changes over time. And I think that's happened a lot for me in my reading as well.
Yeah.
So, I like reading a lot of European stuff, a lot of things that Self-Made Hero do is good. But, of course, what we publish at Soaring Penguin as well is excellent. So looking forward to do a quick plug in here.
I was going to say, nicely slipped in, sir.
Yeah, thank you. We've got David Hine and Mark Stafford just had a book out from Self-Made Hero called Lip Hook, which is a really lovely book. I say lovely, it's disturbing and horrific and makes you want to have a shower afterwards. But the artwork looks brilliant, and it's a fantastic story, but very kind of dark sort of folklore horror type stuff. And so we're doing a book with a similar sort of theme. Is that those guys have coined the term rural unease, which I love as a term. And so we're publishing a thing called The Bad Place, which is going to be out at the end of the year, which is was serialized in our anthology Meanwhile, and so that's going to be collected up as a book. So those two work as a quite nice bookends for each other. So that's so I've just been rereading all of that, and that's love. Yeah, that's great stuff. And I'm a big fan of Mark's artwork, and David as a writer, I've loved since he did Strange Embrace, which was a great, very underrated graphic novel, actually, if no one's ever read it. But definitely worth checking out.
Cool. Right.
Cool.
On that note, thanks so much, Tim, for taking the time to sort of come on and talk to me about the project. And I wish you all the best of it, because I do. I think it's a fantastic idea. Oh, that was what I was going to say. When will you be announcing the six? I was going to say the chosen ones, but that
sounds. Yeah, we'll probably be doing that towards middle end of April.
Okay.
So yeah, so it won't be long after the deadline. Frankly, we're going to try and contact everybody as quickly as possible. And so once they've been notified privately, we'll then obviously make the announcement and keep everyone up to date, obviously, as the project evolves.
Excellent. I look forward to finding out who the Magical Six are.
Excellent.
Big thanks to Tim for coming on and talking to us about the Breakthrough Comics project. So once again, that's going to be launching at the Lakes International Comic Art Festival. You've got about 2 weeks to get your entry in. If you want to find out more, head over to www.comicartfestival.com. The link will be in the show notes. So that's it from me and Geek Syndicate. Hopefully we'll be back soon, so long as I can corral Dave. You can get in contact with us by email, thegeeks@geeksyndicate.co.uk. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. I should say, if you want to join the Facebook group, it's a sort of private group. You just do a search for Geek Syndicate and you just ask to join and we'll let you in. We're also on Instagram. We're all over the shop. But from now, I've been Brian Nugent. This is Geek Syndicate. I'm out.